Let's see. Testing 1, 2. Good evening.
Torey, can you hear me?
Yes.
They're working on receiving audio. So they're doing just a little wiring, rerouting to be able to pick up the Zoom audio. So that,
Okay.
so the, um, they can hear it.
Oh,
But we cannot hear it.
okay. Okay. So just a few more minutes. Be patient with Brother Torey. We'll be right there.
Democrat. Everyone knows conservative Christians vote Republican. It's like one of the rules of nature. The sun comes up in the east and conservative Christians vote Republican. Unless they're black. Oh, right, most African Americans self-identify as Christian, and most African Americans vote Democrat. Look at the numbers. In 2016, 81% of white evangelical Christians voted for Donald Trump. For many Christians, it's just assumed the Republican Party is the party for Christians. But what about black Christians? Pew Research interviewed validated voters after the 2016 election, people they could verify actually voted. When they looked at black Protestant Christians, there is no official category for black evangelicals because most pollsters have decided evangelical is a white term, but that's a whole different video. When we look at black Protestant Christians, 96% voted for Hillary Clinton, the Democrat. 96%. So 81% of white
Yes, I can only
evangelical
hear you.
Christians voted for Trump, and 96% of black Protestant Christians voted for Clinton. And it's pretty much like that in every election. White evangelicals vote Republican, and black Protestants vote Democrat. Why is that? Don't they read the same Bible, pray to the same God? Which group doesn't understand that they're voting for the wrong party? To make things even more confusing, if we go back to 1890, these guys were Republicans and these guys were Democrats. What happened? How did we end up where we are today? Well, let's go back and find out. In 1870, the 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. Since they had this guy to thank for it, and the brand new Republican Party, and since most Southern slave owners at the time were Democrats, almost all African Americans voted Republican. In fact, the first 23 black congressmen were all Republicans. Not all Southern Democrats were these guys, but enough of them were that newly enfranchised African Americans were not likely to vote Democrat anytime soon. Most Southern Democrats considered themselves conservatives. That sounds weird to hear. Everyone knows Republicans are conservative and Democrats are liberal. But the two parties didn't shake out so clearly on conservative and liberal until the 1970s and 80s. Conservative Southern Democrats look back in history to happier days, the glory days of the South before Abe Lincoln and those darn Yankees messed up everything. Those darn Yankees. I think that's a Disney film. But Honest Abe didn't last forever, as you may have heard, and things got messy for black Americans pretty quick. Republican presidents kept federal troops in the South to ensure African Americans could vote. But when the 1876 election was in a deadlock with both parties claiming victory, America was in danger of falling into civil war again. A group of Northern Republicans and Southern Democrats met in secret and made a deal. Rutherford Hayes, the Republican candidate, would become president. In exchange, all federal troops, the ones protecting black rights, would be removed from the South. Yep, Northern Republicans sort of threw Southern black people under the bus. After the federal troops were gone, the guys in the pointy hats clamped down hard, and most African Americans now had a hard time voting for anyone. New Jim Crow laws stripped away many of the rights they had just won. So for many black people, the compromise of 1877 felt like a betrayal at the hands of the Republican Party. Then comes the Great Migration. Living with these guys in charge wasn't much fun, to put it mildly. So millions of African Americans abandoned the South for jobs in new factories in northern cities like Chicago, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. And guess what? In the North, you could vote. Many transplanted African Americans still felt a loyalty to the party of Lincoln, but given the fact that no one in Washington was paying much attention to the needs of black families, the NAACP in 1926 argued that blacks should be loyal to neither party. Between 1868 and 1898, 22 African American representatives were sent to Congress from the South. After federal troops left, Bourbon Democrats' elimination of black votes was so complete that when Oscar DePriest was elected to Congress from Chicago in 1929, there hadn't been an African American in Congress for 30 years. Like all the black congressmen from the 19th century, DePriest was a Republican. And then the Depression. Black workers in northern cities were hit hard, with unemployment rates twice as high as white workers. Underwhelmed by Republican President Herbert Hoover's response to the crisis, Americans of all stripes, including African Americans, found hope in the progressive New Deal programs of Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat. Roosevelt received overwhelming support from northern black voters. When the next African-American candidate, Arthur Mitchell, also from Chicago, won a seat in Congress in 1934, he was something Washington had never seen before, a black Democrat. Over the next 20 years, African Americans continued voting for both Republican and Democratic candidates, and various civil rights measures were proposed by both Democrats and Republicans. Though today this seems hard to believe, there used to be conservative and progressive wings of both parties. In the Democratic Party, the progressives were northern urban Democrats. The conservatives were the Southerners, which, of course, included these guys. In the Republican Party, the progressives were folks like the liberally minded Rockefeller family. For years, to be a progressive Republican was to be a Rockefeller Republican. The conservative wing was made up of those who wanted the federal government to stay small and stay out of their business. Both conservative Northern Republicans and conservative Southern Democrats opposed the federal government getting bigger and launching more programs. So from the early days of Roosevelt's New Deal right up through the 1960s, a coalition of conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats managed to block just about every attempt at new civil rights legislation. In fact, between 1953 and 1965, more than 120 civil rights measures were considered by the Senate. Almost every one was killed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, a powerful committee at the time controlled by Southern Democrats and conservative Northern Republicans. As the years went by, many more of the new civil rights efforts were proposed by Northern Democrats and fewer by Republicans, motivating more black Americans to vote Democrat with regularity. Yet Southern Democrats were still stalling or blocking nearly every bill. The strain between pro-civil rights Northern Democrats and anti-civil rights Southern Democrats was reaching a breaking point, and that break would radically alter American politics. Meet Strom. Strom Thurmond ran for president in 1948 and served in the Senate from 1954 till 2003. Yes, that's a very long time. His career almost perfectly illustrates the shift in political parties over the last 80 years. Strom Thurmond was a Southern Democrat and governor of South Carolina in the late 1940s. He hadn't had a huge problem with Roosevelt's New Deal since Roosevelt didn't mess with segregation in the South. But when Roosevelt's Democratic successor, Harry Truman, integrated the Army in 1948 and proposed aggressive civil rights legislation, Southern Democrats like Thurmond had had enough. Thurmond and a group of Southern Democrats protested by forming the States' Rights Democratic Party, a conservative party dedicated to preserving segregation. Thurmond ran for president against Truman in 1948. A sample of his stump speech: "There's not enough troops in the Army to force the Southern people to break down segregation and admit the Negro race into our theaters, into our swimming pools, into our homes, and into our churches. No Negroes for me, thank you." That was pretty much it. Thurmond lost to Truman badly, and his Dixiecrat Party, that was their nickname because States' Rights Democratic Party was a mouthful, the Dixiecrat Party disbanded. Thurmond ran for Senate as a Southern Democrat and spent the next 20 years fighting to maintain racial segregation in the South. But the tide was turning against the segregationist Southern Democrats as progressive Northern Democrats and Rockefeller Republicans tried again and again to pass civil rights legislation. In 1960, with civil rights protests really heating up in the South, Northern Democrat John F. Kennedy won the White House. Kennedy was initially reluctant to take a strong stand on civil rights, fearing he would lose all Southern support for the rest of his agenda. But after watching attempts to integrate Southern universities end in violence, Kennedy spoke up. In a speech to the nation on June 11, 1963, Kennedy labeled civil rights a moral issue and promised a major civil rights bill to end discrimination against African Americans. 5 months later, Kennedy was assassinated. His successor, Lyndon Johnson, vowed to finish the fight for civil rights in honor of Kennedy. And, propelled by goodwill toward Kennedy and aided by progressive Republicans, Johnson was able to pass the raft of legislation that would end segregation in America. For segregationists like Strom Thurmond, the fact that Johnson, a Southern Democrat, had led the charge was the last straw. In 1964, Thurmond announced that going forward, he was a Republican. Over the next few years, segregationist Democrats like Thurman jumped to the Republican Party in droves, and the South began shifting from blue to red. The identity of the Democratic Party as progressive was settling in, and a new wave of conservative Republicans was about to shift the brand there as well. The Republican candidate for president that year represented a new conservative turn for the party. Barry Goldwater was definitely not a Rockefeller Republican. He hoped to pick up disenfranchised Southern Democrats by opposing the Civil Rights Bill. And his message of states' rights and limited federal government sounded a lot like what segregationists had been saying for years. As a result, Goldwater won the Deep South, but failed in every other state except his home state of Arizona. 4 years later, Republican Richard Nixon tried again, appealing to white suburbanites frightened by scenes of urban riots on TV, with his message of law and order. Goldwater and Nixon were experimenting with a new Southern strategy, focusing on the newly christened Sun Belt states from Florida to California, and appealing to conservative white voters who felt the country was changing too fast and headed in the wrong direction. Nixon figured if he turned the South red, he could win the White House without needing to appeal to urban liberals or black voters at all. He was right. Fast forward to 1980. Ronald Reagan raised eyebrows by launching his presidential campaign in the Deep South with a pledge of support for states' rights. Critics took it as a coded appeal to Dixiecrats, the old states' rights party of segregationist Southern Democrats. The fact that Reagan launched his campaign and talked about states' rights in a Mississippi county best known as the site of the murder of 3 civil rights workers didn't help. Reagan's political and social conservatism built on Nixon's prior success and turned the South bright red. Between 1968 and 1988, the Republican Party had become the party of white, Christian, conservative America. And the Democratic Party was now the party of radical progressive leftists and hippies. Oh, and black church ladies. Right. About that. Black Christians are socially conservative. They're theologically conservative. So why aren't they politically conservative too? Black Christians and white Christians vote very differently, partly because their histories and life experiences are vastly different. When white Christians look at the Supreme Court, for example, they see the reason abortion is legal and school prayer isn't. But when black Christians look at the Supreme Court, they see the reason they can vote and pursue housing and employment without blatant discrimination. That difference in perspective has a huge impact on whether you see the federal government as part of the problem or part of the solution. Having the right to hear a Christian prayer in your local public school doesn't mean much if you're not allowed to attend your local public school. And think about the words progressive and conservative. A progressive believes things should be improved by making progress, by moving forward, by progressing. A conservative believes the good things we presently have are at risk of being lost and need to be conserved, or even revived from the past. So the best way to explain why white Christians vote for conservative candidates and black Christians vote for progressive candidates may simply be this. What do we see when we look in the rearview mirror? White Christians see a simpler time, when everyone went to church, when we prayed in school, when abortion was illegal and gender roles were clear. When black Christians look in the rearview mirror, the view is very different. They see fire hoses and church bombings and lynchings. They see Strom Thurmond saying, "We will never let Negroes into our theaters, swimming pools, homes, or churches." They see white Christians applauding Strom Thurmond for saying that, and then re-electing him to the Senate for 5 decades until he dies in office in 2003 at the age of 100. Is this beginning to make sense? There are other issues. Conservative white Christians see sin mostly as an individual problem, wrongs committed by one person against another, requiring only individual confession and repentance as the solution. Black Christians also see sin as a systemic problem, sinful systems needing broader solutions and broader confession and repentance. So to wrap all this up, it really doesn't help that we've only got 2 viable parties, and that we've decided one is for people who want things to change, and the other is for people who want things to stay the same. I'm oversimplifying, but you get the point. The Bible calls us to hold on to what is good, while also working toward what is best, to conserve and progress. and neither party lines up with that very well. But I hope at least now you understand how Christians from different backgrounds can read the same Bible, pray to the same God, and come to very different conclusions about who's going to get their vote.
Good evening, and welcome to the great debate. We're so glad to have each of you here on campus, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your patience as we work through a few technical issues. We've been looking forward to this evening for a very long time to have a discussion about which political party or being non-affiliated is the best option for those of us who are part of the African American community. So again, my name is Wayne Lomax. I'm the lead pastor here at the Fountain Church, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome each of you here on our campus today. So just give yourselves a hand, if you will. All right, outstanding. Those of you who are online, thank you so much for your patience. We appreciate it. So those of us who are on campus, we're gonna have a very lively discussion tonight. And in the center aisle, you'll find 2 tables, and on those tables are baskets with cards in them, and also have ink pens there. And if you have a question that you'd like to pose to one of our guests tonight, we ask that you would fill out one of those cards and drop it in the basket, and we will do our best to get to your question before the evening starts. Also, we'd like to ask you, if you could, we want you to have a very warm and engaging experience tonight. And so if you would be so kind is to move just a little closer. If you could move a little closer to the front, that would be very great for just the feel, and we want to be close to each of you who are our guests on the campus tonight. And so at this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring to the stage Christopher Lomax, and he is the president of the Wilkie D. Ferguson Jr. Bar Association, and they have worked together to plan this event for us and with us. And so I'm going to bring him up to the stage, and he's going to share with you what the program is going to look like tonight, and we're going to get started. So, good, Chris, good to see you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Again, my name is Chris Lomax. I'm the president of the Wilkie D. Ferguson Jr. Bar Association, and bring you greetings on behalf of the organization. We're so glad to be here to share in this important moment and in this important discussion about the black vote in the United States of America. As you saw in the video, there are a lot of intricacies and nuances about how black people vote, whether they vote, who they vote for. And we want to have a very open and honest discussion about the two-party system and whether it has worked for black people, whether it needs to be changed or improved, and how we can be better advocates and members of the community. And we have some great panelists tonight that you're going to hear from who've done some wonderful things in the community. And we also have some really, really great moderators who you all know, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on all of their very long biographies, which they deserve. But L'Oreal R. Scott and Marlon Hill, who are leaders in our community, presidents of organizations, past presidents of organizations, lawyers extraordinaires, and great friends. And I'm going to ask them to just come on up to the stage now and kick us off. And thank you all for being here tonight.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome once again. We are in the living room of the Fountain Church, L'Oreal. Can somebody say amen? God is good?
All the time.
All the time?
That's right.
Okay. You got the instructions, L'Oreal, from Pastor, the card. This is going to be a living room conversation. We want you to text a friend online, because I know that we are broadcasting live on Facebook as well, so we want everyone to really just come into this conversation. It's really going to be a conversation that is continuous. Just to kind of put some context in the room, L'Oreal, we are here coming live to you from the state of Florida. We are approaching a population of about 19 million and growing, very, 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 very fast. But we have a total number of registered voters of about 15 million. All right, and we have about 5.3 million registered Republicans, 4.8 million registered Democrats. And then we have also independents increasing as well, of about 4.6 million. Thereabouts about 15 million in total. And the black population of the state of Florida is now at about 17%. Okay? 17% of the total population. But the voters here in South Florida, we're about 30% of the total 50 million registered voters. So that just gives you a short context. We're going to be talking about some of those issues with our guests this evening. It is a great debate, not just among the guests, but with you, your families, your friends, your co-workers, the people that you are on the WhatsApp and the DM messaging and the, all of those groups that you're a part of. The great debate is going to continue there, so we hope that you will join the conversation. But thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Marlon. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be in the house of the Lord and to be with you guys. I know for some of y'all, it's the first time y'all are back in church since COVID. I'm not going to call you out, but we know who you are. So praise God to have you here tonight. So along those lines, if you didn't catch anything that Marlon just said with those statistics, what's important, what I heard, is that we need to register to vote. That's what I heard. Did y'all hear that? Now it is church. Remember, it's call response. Did y'all hear that? All right, so y'all need to make sure that y'all are registered. So tonight we're going to talk just about that. We're going to talk about these three parties, and how historically we've had affinity to one or the other, and why do we have that affinity? So our panelists are going to come on the stage shortly, and this is a debate, right? This is a conversation that we're having with them, but we're asking them the tough questions. So our debaters are going to have 2 minutes to introduce themselves to you. They're going to have 1 minute to answer the questions that Marlon and I pose.
And who's the timekeeper?
I was getting to that, Marlon. So our lovely timekeeper, Miss Torey, there she is, our VP of the Wilkie D. Ferguson Junior Bar Association, is going to make sure that we are on track. So she's going to let the debaters know when they hit that 30-second mark. And when they do, and when it is time for them to stop speaking, Marlon and I are going to try to be as nice as possible. But I heard that the Sandman is waiting in the wings to come and kick them off the stage if they run over time. True, not true. So they have 2 minutes to give their introduction, 1 minute to answer the questions, and then we'll close it out with 2 minutes to answer the final question that we'll pose to them. Of course, throughout the night, like Marlon just mentioned, you guys have an opportunity to ask the panelists questions. Please make sure that you write down your questions on the index cards so that we can make sure we get them to the panelists.
Or if we can get those questions from online as well, if we can get any questions from anyone that's on Facebook as well, or if someone who couldn't attend tonight, if they want to text you a question, because we know that a lot of people are talking about this topic.
And we are checking the chat on Facebook. So speaking of Facebook, thank you, Marlon. If you haven't already done so, please make sure that you go onto the Fountains Facebook page and go ahead and share the live stream. We are live on the Fountains Facebook page. So go ahead and pull out your cell phones and share. This is the time that you can get on your phone in church, okay? All right, without any further ado, let's get to it, right?
Let's get our guests join us. Our guests to join us here on the stage. They'll introduce themselves while they're making their way up. You can also follow the Fountain on Instagram at TFC Miami Gardens. You can share that as well and drop any comments there on the flyer of tonight's discussion.
So our lovely timekeeper is going to move to the center so that our debaters can see her in her beautiful green dress. And Madam Timekeeper, you let me know when you're ready to proceed. It is
Can't see her,
hard.
but we'll work it out. We'll work it out.
I have a mic.
Each of you can. We have the microphones in front of you there. You can
Come
switch.
sit by Miss Karen for me. Karen Hunter Jackson. Wave your hand. There you go.
There's a little switch at the bottom.
Can you see her better now? Miss Carter Lynch, can you
Ye-
see her better now? She's right there. She just moved.
Raise your hand.
Wave, babe. There you
So I have a mic.
Okay.
I could give the 30-second warning on the mic.
Okay.
go. Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
So we'll start with ladies first. Ms. Carter Lynch, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Well, hi, and first of all, I want to say thank you to Pastor Lomax and the Fountain family for having this debate. But before I get started with everything, I have to get my center. And I would like to introduce my husband, Pastor Robert Lynch, who always ride with me. It helps me center. My name is Ruth Carter Lynch, and I'm originally from Greenwood, Mississippi. I actually am part of the first generation integration for Mississippi Public Schools. So we'll get into that a little bit later. I am married, as you can see. I have 4 daughters. We have 10 grandkids. I've been in Florida now for 23 years. Prior to that, I spent 34 years in corporate America, living in 7 different states. So I've been all over. I have been a part of the political process since the ripe old age of 16, when I actually marched with Dr. King, John Lewis, Stokely Carmichael, and Jesse Jackson in my hometown of Greenwood, Mississippi, when they were trying to make sure that we all were registered to vote. And if you have questions about that, you can talk to me later. But I am excited. I am ready to answer any question, and I will pass it on to my illustrious friend here.
Yeah, I heard that statistic. You heard 4 daughters, 10 grandkids, right? So that's a large voting household there. Yeah, so it's like a mini city.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's always great to be in my home church, the Fountain, and thanks to Pastor Lomax and all the organizers for a very meaningful discussion. I'm Wayne Messam, and I am the humble and proud mayor. That's an oxymoron, but I am very excited and proud to be the mayor of the city of Miramar, Florida's 13th largest city. I am married to the Angela Messam. We've been married for 25 years. We have 3 adult kids, Wayne, Kayla, and Kyla, our twin daughters. And in terms of a little bit about me, I'm a son of a former and the late Hubert Messam, former sugarcane cutter from Jamaica, along with my mother, Delcy Messam, and my father, Hubert Messam. I was the first of their children born here in the United States, and I always proclaim that I am literally living the American dream despite our pursuit for the promise of America, but I am living that dream that my parents set out when they left Jamaica to come here to the United States. I became Miramar's first Black elected mayor back in 2015. I currently serve the Florida League of Mayors as the president. I'm also I'm a national trustee for the African American Mayors Association. I am a proud Florida State Seminole, former football player, first national championship team back in 1993. I played under legendary coach Bobby Bowden, and also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I think this discussion not only important,
20 seconds.
It's timely, and I look forward to addressing the questions, both that have been prepared as well as those from the audience.
Yeah, I see our timekeeper is on point. Okay. Go ahead, Loria.
That's why we have lawyers as timekeepers. Thank you, Terry Ann, and thank you, Mayor Messam. So we do have one more distinguished guest. He is appearing via Zoom. So Mr. Alston, can you hear us?
I think I can. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
God is a miracle worker. Amen. Amen. Go ahead, Mr. Alston. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, I can hear you now. Good evening, everyone. And this is such a great event. And let me just say, I am talking to you live from Miss Krantz's drama class at Coral Springs High School, because the school board is having a boundary hearing literally right now. And I did not want to miss this event here this evening. Let me also follow my esteemed guests, friends, and panelists the mayor, of course, and also Ms. Ruth, thanking Pastor Lomax, the Wilkie D. Ferguson Law Association, my good friend Chris, who I've known, I think, since elementary school, Chris, and others who I know are there as well. But I'm Torey Alston. I am the son of a deceased law enforcement officer, the son of a social worker from Broward Health. I'm a husband to a young lady who I think is still the finest person walking in South Florida. I think it's recorded, so hopefully she'll hear that. I'm the father of two amazing little ones, Elliot and Torey. And I think I've been Black for about 38 years, so I'm excited to have this conversation as we talk about what's important for the Black agenda and for Black issues here in South Florida. I've been honored to serve in a couple of different capacities, serving my community, whether on the FAMU Board of Trustees, and similar to Wayne, I know we share the Tallahassee connection among many connections. I'm a Rattler. I've been bleeding orange and green for a long time, whether serving on the Boys and Girls Club of Broward County, Chief of Staff at FDOT, helping to manage a $12 billion enterprise. I've been appointed to the Broward County Commission, the Broward School Board,
20
served as
seconds.
the immediate past chair of the board and still serving on the board. I'm a life member of the NAACP and the immediate past first vice president also of the association. So I'm blessed, I'm grateful to join the conversation, and I'll try to keep my comments brief because I think we want to hear from everyone else.
Thank you so much, Torey, for joining us from your boundary meetings. Pay attention to those zip codes they're very, very important. Let's jump into the conversation right here in the living room. I'm gonna go ahead and have Torey, since he already has the microphone, if you can hear me. This is Marlon. So if you could, Torey, if you could just tell us, in your late 30s years as a Black man in America, in the state of Florida, tell us, when did you first become registered to vote? And what did you register as? Are you still registered with that current party? And if you changed, tell us when you did and why. So the question again is, tell me when you first time you registered to vote, and then tell us if you're still registered with an affiliation of that party, and if you changed or not, tell us when and why.
Excellent question. I'm happy to kick it off. So I registered to vote as a Tiger, as a high school student at Blanchely High School. Similar to many in our community, I grew up in a conservative household, grew up in a Democratic household. As I think Ms. Ruth may recall, my dad and brother and others have served as club presidents of Democratic clubs, council of club presidents in Broward, but also a very conservative household. I'll just focus on my dad being a gun-toting, cowboy boot-wearing, NRA, life member, but also law enforcement, but of course a strong Democrat. So I met this young girl named Candace in Tallahassee when we were
20
later
seconds.
at FAMU. She was head of the college Republicans, and ever since, she is the reason that changed my views and perspectives to move away from the Democrat Party at the time. I was actually an MPA for a while, so that may be a shock to some, but I have actually been a Republican for the majority of my political lifetime.
Thank you so much, Torey. Ms. Ruth, what about you?
I had been a Democrat for 52 years.
And when did you first register?
I registered when I was the ripe old age of 18 in Greenwood, Mississippi.
Okay, right out of high school.
Now everybody's gonna know how old I am. Anyway, I changed my party about 3 months ago. And let me tell you why. Because I have spent the last 52 years, and let me just go full disclosure, I actually served as the first vice chair of the Broward Democratic Party for 4 years. And what has happened to me over that time period, I had been looking for something in ideology that spoke directly to me.
20 seconds.
And now that I'm 70, I'm gonna work with anybody. I'm NPA now, no party affiliation.
Did you say 70?
Yes,
That's
I
what
did.
she said. She looks beautiful, right? Black don't crack. That's what they said.
Thank you all.
Mm-hmm. What's your skincare regimen? Okay, we could talk about that later. I just want to remind the debaters that you have 1 minute to answer the questions, okay?
Well,
Mayor
you know,
Messam.
after we finish with all our questions and the conversation gets going, we can come back to anything that you want to complete and say. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for the question. I have been a lifelong Democrat. I registered in between after graduating from high school. So my birthday was in the summer. So when I turned 18 after I graduated, and I registered as a Democrat, going off to Florida State to play football, and have been a proud Democrat ever since that registration. However, being a Democrat, I've always been that voice to speak truth to power, to challenge the Democrats to do things I think that are in the best interest of not only Democrats, but particularly for Black interests in terms of what is important as we as important stakeholders in the Democratic Party, and ensuring that the Democratic Party live up to those principles.
Ms. Carter-Lynch, I just want to go back to that last question. Can you elaborate a little bit more why you decided more recently rather, to change from Democratic Party to non-party affiliated? Why did you make that decision?
Yes. Here's the deal. And my focus now, after you reach a certain age in life and you've done a lot of things, my focus now is going to be strictly for the Black community. And I want to do that with no holds barred, don't care about who I need to talk to make sure that whatever my community needs, we get access to that. One of our major problems is lack of access. Well, I've acquired a lot of access since I've been here, and it's time for us to get away from the I and get to the we and us. So we have to get our stuff together so we can take care of us.
That's interesting, but you held such a high position in the Democratic Party in Broward. You said you were the chair.
I was first vice chair.
The first vice chair. Mm-hmm. So why did you make that leap? Help us to understand your thought process.
Things change. Leadership changed. I was unhappy with the leadership. After the past leadership, I was unhappy with leadership. That's why I changed.
Fair enough. Thank you. Mayor Messam, what do you think are the most important political issues that face the Black community in South Florida today?
Well, I think political issues concerning economic prosperity, because at the end of the day, economics matter. The ability to affect change, to take care of your families, to produce wealth generation and legacy planning. So as a people, economic development, economic prosperity must be at the core of everything that we do. Second, I would say, is the preservation and expansion of voting rights. We must do everything to not only preserve the rights that we have gained over the years, but to fight to expand voting rights and access to the ballot where possible. And third, I would say, is the ability for us to participate in the political process, meaning that we sometimes sacrifice self and get involved politically. Because being in a very diverse state, diverse nation, diverse community, without political participation, we basically are the meal that's on the table.
What do you mean by sacrifice self to get involved in the political process?
Well, in this day and age, despite all the challenges that we may have, we have come so far, and that you literally can be successful as an individual, as a family, without any interaction with those who are in your community, your community, your people, and basically live a successful life without any care as long as you are successful. So, but you can't forget the past. You can't forget all the battles that have been fought, the blood, the sweat, the tears, and the sacrifice of others that put each of us in the position to live the lives that we've been able to accomplish, that we must pay it forward. And sometimes we may have to put back our self-interest, self-motivation to ensure that we as a people, as a collective, can move forward as a community.
So what I'm hearing Mayor Messam say is that we need to deviate from this individualistic mindset and get back to our true roots of a communal mindset that we saw back in Africa, that we got, a little bit lost over the transatlantic. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is Mr. Alston still on the line with us?
Yes, I am. I can barely hear you.
Okay.
Would you mind repeating the question?
So yes, the same question for you. What do you think is the most important political issues facing? Can you hear me now? How about now?
That's a little better.
Okay. What do you think are the most important political issues facing the Black community in South Florida?
Gotcha. I would say, and I think I heard a little bit from the mayor and Ms. Ruth, Black wealth and economic opportunity. I think there's still segments, as many of us know in our community, that still don't have bank accounts, right? The basics. Home ownership is important. Clearly, with our economy the way it is now, as we look at the millennials, the Gen Zers, and others, home ownership is a big conversation right now in the Black community. I'd say quality education. It all starts at home. Parents clearly have to decide what is the right education model for their children. 3, I'd say Black elected officials. So if you look at the Black landscape in Broward versus Miami-Dade, there is the difference.
15 seconds.
In Broward, not sure. In Broward, there are 5 countywide elected constitutional officers who are Black. In Miami-Dade, it's a different environment. So just having that conversation collectively as Black leaders, elected officials, public officials, and of course, lastly, I'll also add in the Black judges, which is also critically important as well.
And help us to understand how that conversation should go. You pointed out that there is much more high-level Black officials in Broward County than in Miami-Dade County. What should we be discussing in order to change that? Mr. Alston? Okay, maybe not. Mayor Messam, do you agree with Mr. Alston's position regarding the Black officials and that we should have a conversation about that?
Well, in terms of Black political engagement, as I said, was my third important issue as a Black community. If we don't have a seat at the table, if we're not a participant in the political process, then our needs are not fully being represented. Because there's one thing to have others to speak for us. There's a totally different thing for us speaking for ourselves and being able to ensure that our issues are not only being considered, but actually being adopted in terms of policy and law moving forward.
Well, in addition to everything they've said, I wrote down living wage and affordable housing and food. We have over 5,000 homeless families, children, in the Broward County School District. And we still have mothers that are working every day and that are living in their cars. We have that type of situation. So we've got to take care of these immediate issues to make sure that our people are not starving and working at the same time. That just doesn't make any sense at all. So that's a major issue. Now, of course, I agree with the economics piece. We have to get a handle on how that looks for the Black community and how we need to participate in that to make sure that works. Okay?
You know, L'Oreal, I'm hearing some common themes as to those issues that are very important, and hopefully our audience members are paying attention to that, because the political parties, they're organizations that have a mission and a culture, but the issues are something separate, right, and how they are addressed. So we're going to get to that part of the conversation. So Ms. Ruth, while you still have the microphone, we're here at the Fountain Church. How do you believe, could be your or our religious beliefs or affiliations or even cultural heritage, or the fact that you're from Mississippi, how do you think that influences or shapes your Black vote or our Black vote?
Well, first and foremost, I agree with the piece that we saw coming out. We all see Christianity differently. We see it based on our experiences with it. See, for instance, for me, I feel, my perspective, that most white people, and maybe some Black people, think that Jesus Christ is white. That's a problem. Because everybody in the world knows that the Garden of Eden is in Africa, and I'm going to leave that right there. So we have to make sure that we are, as pastors, and that we are making it perfectly clear to our community that they are worthy of whatever it is that God has put on this earth for us to have. So, and that's part of the problem. So I think we think differently, and I know I do, because I had to really work on my attitude about that situation because of where I came from and because of the water holes, the dogs, and all of that. I saw that. First generation immigration. They called me the N-word so much in school, I thought it was my middle name. So we have to really, really get that together.
So Miss Ruth, I mean, we're a Bible study, right? With Pastor Lomax. We're Bible study, right? The word doesn't change. So why is there such a difference in that video that we saw at the top of our conversation between those who believe in the word and how they vote? What's your sense on that?
My sense of that is that, you know, we need informed and educated voters. That's one of the things that we haven't done, those of us who have been in that position, to understand why that is so important. We have not, that has not trickled down like it should. I will take my responsibility for dropping the ball on that, because my forefathers and my grandmothers and everybody, they made sure that we knew how important that was. We have dropped the ball on that particular piece. And I think, you know, even with church, I personally love going to church. But that's because I had that foundation. And kids and people do what we do, not what we say. So you have to be that change you want to see, and you have to be in church if you want to invite people to church.
Thank you so much. Mayor, this is your home church, right? Your parents are from Jamaica. Do you think your religious beliefs or affiliations or the fact that you're of Jamaican descent shapes you as a black voter, or is shaping the black vote in Florida or America today?
Well, I often share my story in terms of just stating that I think I'm bicultured, right? So I'm the first of Jamaican parents whose kids were born in the United States, myself and my younger brother. We grew up in a black neighborhood right off the shores of Lake Okeechobee, affectionately known as the Muck. I grew up in South Bay, went to high school in Belglade. So I have a very conservative Jamaican household where I was infused with Jamaican culture, but in the community, in my schools, and in the neighborhood, as an African-American community. So I see both of those dynamics of two different diasporas merging together is now what represents who I am. But getting back to the question is that I think the church has always been that sanctuary where black people dating back from Jim Crow years, even back to
10
slavery,
seconds.
has been the crust. And it's very hard to answer this very complex question in 60 seconds. But however, what I would say is that the church has always been that sanctuary for thought, for for rights. The church has been that safe place for black people to organize, to protest, and to move forward the agenda of the black experience. And I think at the time with the Democrats kind of shifting, as you saw in the video, pushing for more civil rights and equality is why you have that alignment, for the most part, with the black community and church, and being in alignment with the Democratic Party.
Right. You know, you said something that you lived in a very conservative Jamaican household. I want to spend a little time there. What do you mean by that? Because when we use these words, conservative and progressive and, you know, liberal and whatever, all the different labels. So what?
So when I say conservative, meaning values, meaning roots, these are our principles. This is what we stand for. This is why we sacrifice. Don't follow fashion. Stay pretty much principled in terms of what the goal is. Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't deviate. So
but is that a political statement, though, Mayor?
I don't necessarily say that.
Say that you have values and you know, don't follow fashion. Is that a political party statement?
Meaning conservative, just like the definition stated, conservative is keeping in tune with a particular, not necessarily sect, but a particular order and guidance. That is being conservative. Progressiveness means just expression, being able to explore, to change, to adapt based off circumstances. I'm not saying that one is negative or one is positive. I'm just giving it into context in terms of what I mean by a conservative household.
Got you. I got your point. Torey, if you're still there, board member Alston, same question for you. How do you believe how do you think our religious beliefs or religious affiliations or cultural heritage or other ways of describing ourselves as black people shapes the black vote or your black vote?
Thanks, Brother Hill. Actually, I'm gonna piggyback off of something I think I just heard the mayor say. I'll call myself a progressive conservative. How about that, Wayne? Mr. Mayor, right? But no, to answer the question, look, I think both have already said it. I think as black folks, I think we've grown up and we all grow up, I think overall very conservative. I think I'll answer the second part of it. I think what you said as well, if you look at our beliefs as a people, and I think our votes, they clearly mostly do not align. So I think, Marlon, I think you were trying to get to, what are those issues, right? So clearly, whether it's, and I think Ms. Ruth touched on this as well, clearly our strong values, praying in morning, noon, and night, right? Whether it's, those who believe in being pro-life.
10 seconds.
That marriage is between a man and a woman, right? All the things that as a church and in church that we've talked about. But over the years, I'll just say now that, there have been so many new social norms and views, I think all of that, is what I'll call it, creates a difficult environment to have these courageous conversations. And I think this is the right way to do it.
Thank you so much, Torey. Board Member Alston, thank you so much.
I see Ms. Carter Lynch is itching to respond. Go right ahead.
I know I've already responded, but to everybody's point, to Torey's point, when we grew up, we understood. Almost everybody in my community were conservative. And to us, that meant that you can do certain things, but you don't go outside a certain area. For instance, you can be progressive, but to a point. And to his point about the dressing, yeah, we can dress, but coming from a conservative household, that's a political statement. If you go out there with everything out.
So are you a progressive independent or a conservative independent?
I am a progressive independent. Okay.
I think we're making some news with these.
By the time y'all leave here, y'all gonna be confused about all these labels, okay?
Mayor, you're gonna jump
What I was gonna say, I think that most of America is either just right of center or just left of center. But who gets the shine or the spotlight are the fringe left and the fringe right. And that seems to dominate the message, what we see on social media, what we see on TV. But I think when we see these elections and we see these results and we're like, well, wow, how did it end up being like that? And I think that most of America is pretty much.
What about most of Black America? Do you see Black America being center left or center right these days, or yesterday or last year? Where are we?
Well, the thing with Black America is that we're not monolithic. We don't all come from the same backgrounds. We don't come from all the same experiences. So what one set of Black people may see that, okay, these are our rights. We need more. Are we being disenfranchised? You may have someone or an immigrant may come to this country and say that, wow, I wish we had that back from where I'm from. And in this country, at least I have this, and this is something that I can build upon. So do we discount that thought? Or do we give more credit to a position, for example, where, and I can understand for American descendants of slaves that have gone through so much in this country that basically has paved the way for every Black experience that have come to benefit from all of that labor and all of that sacrifice. So it's very hard to say Black America. So I really can't answer that question. But what we must do as a people is that we must come up with some kind of collective as a people so that we can continue the progression of our access, our rights, and denounce any effort that will take us back into history, any effort that will try to rewind the clock or take us back into time, and that's what we all must do.
So I think that that's a great segue, because I really want us to go back to Marlon's original question. What I hear as the elephant in the room is that it's no secret, right? African Americans, Black people in America, the history of the African in America is one that's fraught with tragedy and triumph, egregious hardship, and unimaginable obstacles that we had to overcome in order to be where we are. Ms. Carter Lynch, is something that you said that keeps troubling my spirit.
Okay.
This history of oppression that African Americans had to endure, and some may argue we are still currently enduring, created what a poet referred to as mind-forged manacles, right? Mind-forged manacles, shackles in our mind. Shackles in our mind. So your namesake Lynch,
Yes.
Willie Lynch,
Yes.
the purported slave owner who went to the West Indies and told the West Indians, gave a speech, or excuse me, let me rewind my history. A slave owner from the West Indies that came to the colonies to tell the colonies how to deal with their unruly slaves. Y'all might have heard this story about Willie Lynch. Whether it's fact or fiction, he said, the way that you ensure control over your slaves is to separate them based on male, female, light skin, dark skin, field nigger, house nigger, etc., etc. He said, if you set up this system, you will ensure complete control over your slaves for the next 300 years. He gave that speech in about 17-something. 300 years marked when Barack Obama became president. We still see the remnants and the effect of Willie Lynch now. So what I'm trying to understand is, given our history of oppression and these mind-forged manacles, these shackles that we now have in our mind, and we are self-perpetuating the Willie Lynch syndrome, how do you think that that affected or affects our party choices?
Let me speak to that from my standpoint, my perspective. You know, that's why I said when we first started, my focus is going to be on the Black community, because until we get our act together, we're not going to be able to. Now, we've made a lot of strides, don't get me wrong, because my grandfather used to say nothing thrives on a dead fact. The fact of the matter is, slavery was then, and it's only permanent in our mind. So we've got to get together and make sure we help our sisters and brothers release those shackles. Give them the okay to be okay. That's what we have to do. And everything happens not to you, it should happen with you.
10 seconds.
Okay.
But when you talked about conservative and your definition of conservative a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
you said because of your background that conservative meant basically to stay in your place.
Well, to a point. I was fortunate. I was one of those fortunate people that I had grandparents that were very politically active. So when Dr. King came to Mississippi, along with the other people, she told us, you have two choices: to go out and march with Dr. King so you can learn something, or you can stay in the house. So, and when they did that, they told us this too: you might not come back. You might get killed. So what we said, well, you know, we got to do, this is worth dying for. We are at a point now where we don't have anything that we know, that we feel is worth the time and the energy. That's the reason why I stay engaged. Like I told you earlier when we were talking, I want to pass the mantle to the young people, but I can't do that until I'm comfortable with the fact that I've given you all everything that I can give you.
So despite our history of oppression, our desire, our need, our hunger for freedom is even stronger.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
So Mayor Messam, the same question for you. How do you think this history of oppression of the African in America affects our political choices?
Well, obviously it has a direct impact in terms of where a person may be in their exact moment. Now, in terms of people thinking about slavery or oppression to decide on a party, I think that for the most part, they may get accustomed to, well, my father, my mother was a Democrat, I'm gonna be a Democrat, and I just identify with that. But I just pose this question to us all. is that when will we decide as a people in terms of what makes us who we are? What has transpired in the past to put us where we are? And at what point do we stop letting the past attenuate or stop us from progressing? We must always acknowledge the past and using that as a guidance, as a compass. But we have to be able to move forward and build upon that. And we know that we can't get lost in terms of our gains. We have to always acknowledge that. But as we're progressing, we have to be able to pull up, and that's the difference. Some of us forget where we come from. Some of us forget the sacrifice of others that have put us in this place. So we have to make sure that as we are ascending, that we are leaving a pathway for others to come up. And as I stated, and we must always denounce any action that will continue to stop us from continuing to move forward.
So when we look at our past, we have to know where we came from in order to know where we're going, right? If we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it, right? All those cliches are not cliches, those are facts. That's what we see happen, arguably, with President Trump, right? Whole nother story for a whole nother day. If we focus on our past as a reference point and a learning point, which is why we're here today, the Republican Party was historically the party of Abraham Lincoln, as we saw from the film. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Black folks voted Republican because he freed us. Is the Republican Party still the party of Lincoln? If it's not, when do you think that shift occurred?
Well, again, I consider myself, I'm in my 40s, right? So I'm middle-aged. And I honestly, when I think about my politics, I don't necessarily think about Lincoln. I think about where I am today, the laws that are impacting me today, and what can I do to either strengthen them or to change them to where I want to be in the future and where I want my children to be, right? So I think that's where most people are. That's why in my city, we were the first city in the state to denounce the anti-woke, all the stuff that DeSantis is putting out in terms of blocking African-American history being taught in our schools. And I'm also encouraging other mayors in other cities to follow suit to pass their own, and some cities have already begun to do so. So now for those who and history is so important. That's why I fight for our rights to be able to teach our children and those who want to learn about Black history. But we must spend most of our time being involved today, organizing, strategizing, building economic wealth and prosperity so that we can chart our way forward. Because we cannot fall in the trap with letting the politics of Republicans and Democrats keep us in our place so that we cannot move forward. And that's where our discussion, I think, needs to move forward, needs to stay on, and we have to continue to organize and operate within this system. Now,
I know.
I know we got time. I'll get back to that.
We're going to let you get back to it, and I know you're itching, but I want to hear from the Republican.
Okay.
I do. Mr. Alston, if you're still there.
Progressive.
The progressive conservative. I don't even know what that means. It sounds like an oxymoron to me. I don't know. So, Mr. Alston, can you hear us?
L'Oreal, he's been called for a vote at the school board, so he may be back on shortly.
God bless his
All right, he's
vote.
going to vote on some progress.
He's going to vote. So now you are itching. So I want to stick with that question, though.
Yeah, I want to.
Do you believe that the Republican Party is still the party of Lincoln, quote unquote?
Well,
And if not, when did it make the change?
Well, let's be real clear about. Let's be real clear about Lincoln, okay? First of all, Lincoln did not free the slaves. He saved the Union, okay? In his inaugural address, Lincoln promised not to interfere with the institution of slavery. However, he took a firm stance on federal property. So what happened is, Lincoln said, and I quote, "If I could save the Union without freeing the slave, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing all the slaves, I would do that too." Therefore, what Lincoln did was to save the Union, and we were residual recipients of him saving the Union. I just want to make that very clear, okay?
Okay. All right. She's taking out the hot sauce right now.
I was waiting for
So, Ms.
somebody
Lynch,
to do
so
it.
let me-
I'm ready.
If you want to raise your hand, I want to ask you this question
Okay.
straight up. How important is this Black history, and how much we learn about Black history, is it to your Black vote?
Say that.
How important is it in terms of Black history, what we learn, how much we learn, who learns it, when they learn it, where they learn it? How important is all of that to your vote as a Black woman?
100% important to me as
Why
a
is
Black
that?
woman. Because how are you out here making decisions about my life when you don't even know me? You have to talk to me in order to know me. And you have to ask me what I need. Not just because you feel like everybody else needs a whole lot of things. And when I'm talking about me, I'm talking about my Black community when I speak like that. Nobody asks us what we want. They just come up with the agenda and they expect us to fall in line. That's my problem.
Right. Got you. Mary, what's your thoughts on this whole current environment of how much Black history, where we learn Black history, why we learn Black history, how we learn Black history? How important is that discourse, or this discourse, because it's present, important for you as a Black voter?
It's everything. It's everything to my vote, because this country was built on the backs of slaves. Not only this country, but most countries, and definitely in the Western Hemisphere, were built on the backs of Black people. So to erase or to void that experience and the contributions of Blacks, not only on every aspect of the development and the growth of this country, is to deny who this country really is. I was having a very interesting discussion with one of board member Alston's colleagues, who is on the side of what is taught in schools and not wanting or agreeing with the governor. And after a long discussion with her, I convicted her in terms of her. She was more focused on how people may feel about the experience of Black people, and they weren't responsible for what happened back in the day, so therefore it shouldn't be taught. And after that discussion, I believe I had some impact in terms of not necessarily converting her or moving her, but at least understanding why it is important. But I'd say that to say this: it is very scary that we have a board member right here in Broward County that is willing to sign on or co-sign to that mess that is coming down from DeSantis. It's chilling. It's not only, it's upsetting. And we as a Black community, we better wake up, because we're walking around seeing these headlines that's coming down from Tallahassee. They're directly defunding diversity, equity, inclusion programs in higher education, which many of us were beneficiaries of. Many of us may have gone to HBCUs, which were land grant or either private. And we're sitting here in our homes and we're not speaking up. Maybe we don't know how to, but I'm telling you, if we stay silent and if we continue to do nothing, what will be next? It will be more than just what is taught to your kids in school.
The judge has raised the time clock. Thank you, Mayor.
Before you ask that question, Marlon, and I know you're itching again, you the firecracker over there. I just want to remind the audience that you all have an opportunity to submit your questions. So if you haven't done so already, please make sure that you write your questions and put them in the basket. I see that we have a couple coming up. We're almost at that point for your questions, and I don't want y'all to miss out. Marlon, did you have another question for
I'm gonna just throw a little hot sauce here from the audience, because they're part of this living room right here.
Okay.
So I want to kind of bring them into the room and not leave them out of this conversation, so they can partake with some of this hot sauce. This question is for Board Member Alston and also for Ms. Lynch. Mississippi lawmakers seek to return to Jim Crow with separate white system of justice. Can you elaborate on this happening, and how do you feel about that as a former resident of Mississippi?
I think it's asinine. That's the first thing. Let me get my feelings out. But at some point, we got to get past the feelings and figure out a strategy to help each other. We got to get, passion is wonderful, but passion does not pay the bills. So we have to be able to be clear-minded enough to see exactly what's happening. And what's happening is they're trying to make sure, because I talk about it with my buddies all the time, that black officers cannot arrest white people. In Jackson, Mississippi, the capital, which is predominantly black. That's what's happening. They're trying to fix it so they're segregating everything. Black people can only arrest black officers. White officers can only arrest white people. So they're trying to turn the clock back. That's really what's happening. And it would be asinine if we allow that as black people for that to happen. Because Mississippi is predominantly black, by the way.
Yeah, that part. Another question, well, I don't know if Board Member Alston is back, but I'll come back to Board Member Alston. So Mayor, just to kind of jump onto the question of the value of the black vote, whether to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, who gets to determine the value of our vote? And from your perspective, how valuable is it?
It's very valuable. I mean, the black vote may not necessarily be the most populous minority vote now in the country. I think Hispanic Americans may have surpassed us. But first, let me say this. I think it is important that we have African Americans on all sides of the political spectrum, in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I would challenge us all, as a Democrat, if I see the Democratic Party doing something that is detrimental to the black community, I must speak up and I must do something about it. Same as my black Republican counterparts. When you see your party going off the rails on important black issues, you must have the conviction to speak truth to power. That doesn't mean that you as a Republican are violating or crossing up your conservative values, or me as a Democrat denouncing my progressive positions. But we as a black people, as a black person, we must always be able to unite on core principles, core values.
Time.
So let me ask you, Mayor, in terms of the value of the black vote, if you were to ask, what would make you feel? Let me just ask you straight. What would make you feel that a party is making your vote as a black voter feel valuable or devalued? What does that look like?
Well, what I'll say is that I know that I've been a critic of the Democratic Party in terms of taking the black vote for granted. During major election cycles, you can tell if they respect the black vote. Who's their political consultants? Where are they spending the millions of dollars in contributions? Are they going to our black strategists? Are they buying ad space in our black media? Are they waiting 2 weeks before election to get engaged in the community right here in Miami Gardens, Miramar, and some of the communities? Or when are they engaging us? And I believe that the Democratic Party is definitely guilty of that. And I've been very vocal on that.
Republicans have millions too.
Well, the thing is that Republicans know where their base is. The Republicans don't consider the black vote as their base. Of course, they want to get as many black voters as possible, but if you think about it, you have to look at their actions and what they do. Both parties are guilty, which means that while we as a people, we need to unite, come up with core principle values, and hold both parties and take both parties to the task to make sure that they are addressing our issues.
Ms. Lynch, is it about the money?
Oh, absolutely. Everything is about money in the United States of America. It's a capitalistic system. But to Mayor Messam's point, I have a real issue with the Democratic Party because they bring in everybody to work in our community specifically. And none of them, for the most part, even look like me or even know where I live. So they hire us for pennies to take these people around to garner our vote. At some point, we, Those of us who are doing it, we have to say no. We got to say stop it. And if the Democratic Party continue to do it, the Republican Party, they don't feel like they have to do it, to Wayne's point. They don't. They don't think they need our vote to win anything. But.
And what? Why is that? Why do you feel that's the case?
Because they count the numbers, okay? It's all about the numbers. We need to take power where it's available, and that's in our communities. We need to put people in office that speak to our issues and concerns. That's what we need to do. We always put a lot of people in office, and I say this all the time. In the black community, with a lot of our black politicians, Wayne, you excluded, we have too many non-fighters in fighter positions. We gotta make sure that we put people in office that's willing to fight for our agenda. Now, I don't mind other people getting stuff too, because I'm a capitalist too. Trust me, I have my own business. But I want them to make my issue as top of mind, just like everybody else's.
Y'all make sure that y'all catch that hashtag, too many non-fighters in fighting positions. All right, now that's a word.
I want the t-shirt.
I do. Mayor, we do have another question. This is remotely. Since we're on the subject of the Democratic Party and how we question whether or not they value the black vote, what has the Democratic Party done to earn the vote of black people, given the continued state of black America in terms of economics, education, and over-policing?
Well, I think it's unquestionable when you compare the Democratic Party to the Republican Party in terms of its policies and what comes from the White House, or at least in the positions where Democrats are in the position to do things that they have passed many laws, many bills, many resources that have benefited our community. If you look at the agenda of President Biden, I think that there are so many areas where you can point out in terms of where it has benefited the black community. Now, there's always more that can and should be gained. So I don't want to split hairs. I think it's undeniable in terms of the policies. We look at it strictly and purely a policy position. However, I do think, though, as a community, because we're talking about the black vote, and I know that it's easy to go between black to Republican and to Democrats. But when you think about other groups don't have to ask for permission on things that are important to them. I applaud the Jewish community and their position on how they galvanize their wealth, how they galvanize their political position, how they protect the history and the preservation of the Holocaust and the cruelty that it caused and the impact that it had on this world. But why do we as a black people, we talk about slave, when we talk about Jim Crow laws, and we talk about civil rights and justices, and just the assault on the voting rights that we have, and we've been struggling for in this country, that all of a sudden we are made to feel uncomfortable about challenging those who are in position to ensure that they're protecting us, are fighting for expansion of our rights, or just rights in general. So that's why we as a people, we have to make sure that we are coming together, and that's my common theme.
Why are we
establishing core values and positions that we as a community can stand behind and force others to not only respect, but to work towards the advancement of our causes.
Ms. Lynch said non-fighting, what was the...
It's too many non-fighters in fighting positions.
Why aren't there enough fighting people in non-fighting roles?
I can tell you why. I can tell you why in terms of elected official, okay? Most elected officials are in office not just because of popularity or their ability to garner votes, but it's about the resources that put them in positions to garner votes and the sort in which it comes. They are beholden to those who fund their campaigns. So when important decisions and when important votes come forward, they're muzzled. They can't stand on their own. And that's why I will always get back to economic prosperity. When we control our own wealth, when we control our own destiny, we can establish our own political positions because we don't care what you say because we have the funding to get our message out. And that is why economic prosperity and ability to generate generational wealth And wealth for today is so important, and we need to have wealth politically because we don't participate. When I run for campaigns, I don't get the money that other communities get.
Time.
So we have
Mayor
to get, that's a
Messam?
cultural thing. That's a cultural thing that we need to have a discussion on.
You're trying to invoke the Sandman. I hear him in the wings waiting for you. Don't do it. Don't
Y'all
do
throwing sauce, so I'm
it.
just
Don't do it.
just responding.
Ms. Carter Lynch, I know Marlon tried to pose the same question to you. Go ahead.
We need to make sure that we are helping to fund these people we want in office. I'll get back to his point, number one. And we also need to vote because we understand where they're coming from. Let me just be real clear. A lot of people that run for office in our community, they don't even know what they're running for. They can't even come and tell you the issues that they should be fighting for you. But people vote for people because they know them, because they are
It's
Democrat.
a pageant and a popularity contest.
It's a popularity, but we got to get away from that. We have to become more educated voters and vote for people we know will fight for us. Who cares about, I tell everybody, when I run for office, I'm not attached to the outcome. I don't care what the outcome is. I'm still going to do what I need to do for black people. So
With
that's
that, we need to hear from the youth. So y'all know the word says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. How we have candidates that are not knowledgeable, praise God. So we want to hear from the youth. Pastor, is the team ready with his question?
Hello, I am Riley
For her.
Kirsten, and I am in the 10th grade, and I attend Everglades High School. My question today is, what do you suggest that we do to increase voting turnout at our local elections?
Great question.
What do we do to increase voter turnout? I'm not seeing the fire, Mayor, among our people. Lori, I'm not seeing the fire. There are lots of issues and challenges, but I'm not seeing the fire. We're talking about the non-fighting folks in fighting roles. I'm seeing non-fighting people. Why can't we see greater turnout?
Even better, Marlon, back to your statistic from earlier. Marlon told you all it's 5,000 something. Five what? What was the number of
15
registered?
million registered voters in the state of Florida.
What was the number of registered Republicans?
Oh,
500.
5.3 million, and then 4.8 million registered Democrats.
They got 1 million more registered, and we wonder why the
And that was just in the last year and a half, 2 years, by the way. Just want to put on our point. There were, previously to that, 2020, more registered Democrats than Republicans in the state of Florida. But I'll leave that right there and go back to our young person's question. What's up with the turnout?
But thanks, Ms. Kirsten, for that very
You just
important question.
You just finished an election, Mayor, right?
But voting is very personal, and I think the onus is on the voter to not squander an opportunity to vote, a right that has been sacredly, earned by so many people that have given their lives, that have been beaten, that have been brutalized, for us to have the convenience to sit it out on an election. So I think the onus is on the voter. Now,
What did you hear in Miramar this past election? Your election, 3,000 people turned out. How many registered voters in the city of Miramar?
there are approximately about 80,000, 80 plus nearly 90,000 registered voters in Miramar.
What do you think happened?
Well, municipal elections on a non-general election typically are low turnout. People either not vote because of they don't know the elections are taking place, they're apathetic, or they just take it for granted. That's the million-dollar question. But I just think that everyone should vote. Parents should be taking their children to the polls when they actually go and vote. If you vote by mail, have them sit there and vote with you, so it just plants that seed. And just we've always, with our children, every election they've always come with us, so they were raised to vote. But we cannot let apathy, we can't let just the process of just being ignorant or just being lazy. We have to make sure that we are educating people on the importance of voting and why voting is important. I think most people who don't vote they don't understand or make the connection on why it's so important. People don't understand general civics. They don't know about their city hall. They don't know when their commissioners or their councils are meeting. They don't know what their mayor does, their council member does, their commission members does. People in Miramar who may be disconnected don't realize we have nearly a $300 million budget that's directly impacting them. So I think the more we can educate them on why it's important to vote, that will increase that turnout.
Bump heads. There's a big difference between registered voter and eligible voter, okay? You can be registered all day, but you might not be eligible if you're not keeping up with that. I pulled some statistics yesterday specifically for this. In Florida, there are only 2.5 million eligible voters in the state of Florida. And while I'm on that, let's talk about the fact that if you vote by mail, you need to you need to make sure you request that again. Because in 2024, if you haven't requested that vote by mail, you will not be receiving it. And it is one of the most important elections on the planet because everybody is up for election here in the state of Florida and the United States, including the president. So we need to make sure we do that and check your voter status because eligibility is the issue. And we all know that Ron DeSantis is doing everything he can to make sure that we don't vote, we don't know anything, and we can't do anything.
And Marlon, to that point, in my election, every municipal election in this state, when the state legislature changed the voting laws in 2022, it, in effect, I know in Broward County, statewide, it erased every upcoming mail-in ballot request. So if you voted in November and you elected to get your March Miramar election vote by mail ballot to vote for Mayor Messam for re-election, it was about over 10,000 that would have automatically went out in Miramar. It went down to zero, because every year you have to make a new request. So we had to spend resources educating the electorate while they were home sitting, waiting for their ballot, thinking it was going to come, but it was not. And that's why policy is so important. So when I say that we're home, we're staying home, we're not paying attention what's going on in Tallahassee, even right now, today in Tallahassee, they're voting on bills that will impact your life. And we have no interest in it. So that's why I say I put the onus on the voters to wake up, get involved in civics, understand what is going on not only at your city hall, but also at Capitol in the state of Florida, because it's laws like that, what took place in 2022, that's impacting us right here in our home cities.
We have one more question from our team. Speaking of civic engagement, Pastor.
My first question is, why should young people trust your party?
Powerful. Go ahead, Ms. Lynch.
Board member Alston still at the school board? Or? Yeah, still working on boundaries. Ms. Lynch?
Well, I'm going to say I don't have a party right now.
So why should they trust you as a progressive, conservative, independent?
Because I'm going to be in the space, any space I want to be in, not because I'm afraid of judgment or the outcome. I'm going to be there because I'm going to try to help all of my Black community, and especially our teens. And when the question you ask about, there's no energy, let's just face it, and let's call this out too. Most of our children right now, they're just as entitled, they feel like they are, entitled as everybody else. So we've got to make sure that we are educating our kids ourselves at home, because they're trying to erase us. So we, as parents, all of us should work with the millennials and all of the young people. Absolutely, we have to be energized in order to energize them.
Let me just ask this question, Lori. I gotta ask it. Do you think Black people should be strategic free agents?
Yeah, based on my 70 years of being Black in America, absolutely.
And what does that look like to you?
What that looks like to me, to be able to work with whoever is going to make my issues, my community, and especially my kids. I'm gonna be honest with you, I think we need to reimagine education. So it will impact, because our black kids, they are having a hard time with the education system right now. So we need to have those open conversations, because our black boys are flunking at alarming rates, and that's a problem. So those type of things, I'm willing to work and talk to anybody that's gonna help me get my kids and my black community on track.
So much to unpack for another time. Mayor Messam, can you address the youth question before we go into our closing statement?
Almost looks like your son. So why should we trust you, Mayor?
Well, first I would say to the young brother is to trust himself. And he can trust himself by educating himself in the political process and whatever he would decide. That's to be the first thing that I would tell him. Now, the dynamics and the circumstances of our political process is that if with all due respect to our brothers and sisters who are independents, you eliminate your ability to participate in the primary process when you're not affiliated with the party. That's one.
At least in the state of Florida.
In the state of Florida, in the state of Florida. So you eliminate your process. You basically have to make a decision based on the cards you're dealt by those who've participated in the primary process. So that's one downside of it. But as relates to, let's say, an independent agent, right? The thing is that we just have to hold people accountable. My position is that the Democratic Party puts black people in the best position to advance black rights. The problem is how are we involved and engaged in the Democratic Party? How are we pushing the paradigm? How are we contributing? How are we making sure that we are shaping the issues of the Democratic agenda? Now, I'm not saying that can't take place in the Republican Party. I'm just saying look at the policies, look at the bills, and look at how steep which hill is to climb. I think that the Democratic Party is a much easier hill to climb that we can influence and that we can impact to move and advance the issues of black people.
Thank you, Mayor Messam. With that, members of the audience, you guys gave us a lot of great questions that I know the debaters want to talk to you about afterwards. You know, like, why don't municipalities put forth a real effort to advertise every election? That's deep. But we can't get to that right now.
And we have a couple other questions for Board Member Alston. No, I just want to put it on the record that the audience wanted to know about school vouchers and the value of school vouchers. Just want to put that out there. They wanted to also talk about Black history being taught in school and why is it being removed and what's educational value. I want to put that on the record from the audience here at the fountain. They wanted to know how do you feel about Rosa Parks being banned?
That sounds like a part 2, Pastor. And Chris, that sounds like we need to make sure that he's here in person for that.
L'Oreal, before we wind down, I just want to remind all the listeners and the viewers online and here in the audience, make sure that you are, like Ms. Lynch said, renewing your vote by mail request. Make sure that you are also submitting your voter registration, changing your address, updating your signature. Remember that before each election, you need to be registered 29 days before you go out to vote. But the most important thing that changed in the last few months was the removal of all vote by mail requests. Right, it's very, very simple. You can do it by fax. You can do it by email, you can do it by phone, and you can do it in person as well. Make sure that you request your vote by mail status. Is one of the most easiest ways to vote as well. Pastor, the election is coming up in 2024. As Mayor Messam said, there's going to be a primary election in August in 2024, and those people who do not get more than 50%, depending on the race, will have to go and vote in November. If you are a registered Democrat, L'Oreal, you can only vote for Democrats. If you're a registered Republican, you can only vote for Republicans. The NPAs will have to wait until November, but that doesn't mean that they can't do their homework, Ms. Lynch, and influence the process as well, right?
Absolutely. Definitely need to be in the influence position, okay?
And we're going to hear more about your thoughts during our final thoughts.
Right.
So with that, the candidates are going to have 2 minutes to answer this last question. So in light of the social, economic, and political gains, what would you describe as unfinished business? And we'll allow ladies first.
Okay, I wrote down my unfinished business because I wanted to make sure I said it exactly what I wanted to say, and I'm not taking up minutes. Hold on just a second. First of all, the one thing, unfinished business, I'm tired of fighting us. I'm tired of fighting with us. You know, and I'm tired of having us always carry somebody else's water. You know, it's amazing when things happen, every nationality, every immigrant expect for the black people to jump on the bandwagon. But I don't see anybody out here jumping on the bandwagon when we talking about this black on black crime. So that's another story too, a whole nother thing. For me, my unfinished business is assisting my black community, especially millennials, to create an agenda that works for us. And if others benefit from it, I'm okay with that too. I'm ready to pass the mantle, but not without a blueprint. I think that we definitely, I'm fired up. You know, when they said no, I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. And I want to leave in a minute. But I don't feel like I can do that until everybody else is as fired up as I am about being black.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lynch. Mr. Mayor, what are your thoughts on that question?
That's a loaded question, but the first thought that comes to my mind is that unfinished business is black people today not honoring and taking advantage of what was fought for. Unfinished today is those of us who have been so-called successful, being selfish, and living your own lives without being involved to advance the cause for the whole. Unfinished business is us always blaming others for our challenges. Unfinished business is us seeing all these bills being passed and we are sitting home
with the remote
doing
control.
Nothing. Unfinished business is us registering to vote and not going to vote. Unfinished business is not giving just $5 to a candidate you support or to an issue you support to help that candidate or that issue be able to reach others so that it can advance. And unfinished business is us being afraid to make radical decisions and taking radical positions that we know are necessary to convict those to do right by black people. That's unfinished business.
That part, put a period and an exclamation point on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Period, as the kids say. Period.
You know, Pastor, we're going to have to continue this conversation again here at the Fountain or at another place of worship because Board Member Alston, I don't think he got his full opportunity to answer some of these questions that came from the audience. They were ready.
They were. I was ready to hear it.
I'm going to have to send him a DM message with some of these questions.
So with that, we thank our debaters. We thank you all. You've been a wonderful audience. Marlon already mentioned to you the importance of making sure that you're registered to vote in a timely manner, that you update your signature card or your signature for your voter's registration card, and that you request your mail by vote ballot. It's very important that we start thinking now on how we will strategically mobilize for the 2024 elections. It is so much at stake in this presidential election, but also keep in mind we have local elections that govern our everyday lives, from politicians who are non-fighters in these fighting positions and who lack the knowledge and the wherewithal for the positions that they seek, perish for a lack of knowledge. Pastor Lomax, Chris, do y'all want to come close us out?
Absolutely. Let's give all of our guests and our moderators a hand for an excellent job. Mayor Messam, Ms. Lynch, thank you so much. Attorney Hill, Attorney Allscott, thank you so much for excellent presentation tonight. Were you informed, empowered, and educated tonight? Come on, clap your hands. Those of you online, thank you so much for joining us. And I love the recommendation that we continue this conversation. I don't like so much at another church. I like it right here. I like it right here. So if we're going to have the conversation, we're going to have the conversation right here at the Fountain Church. And so I do, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank Chris. He's my oldest son. Thank you, Christopher, so much. L'Oreal, thank you so much for your great leadership and for the work, for all the team behind the scenes, my staff here at the church, for everything that you did to make this possible. For our guests tonight, Ms. Lynch and Mayor Messam, for their insightful responses to these questions. We appreciate their forthrightness and their honesty. And for Torey, who did tell us that he had an obligation with the school board as they're voting on districts tonight. But we want to get him back because it seems like there are a lot of questions that the audience had that they wanted to hear answers about regarding his party affiliation and what relationship it has to the progress of black people in the United States. Before we close tonight, one thing I do want to say, we wanted to host this event because we do not want to take for granted the power of the vote. Every advancement that black people have made in America is directly related to representation, either on the local level, state level, or on the national level. And so it's important for us to be educated and to be engaged. Amen? Amen. And so having said that, I'm going to give one church announcement. If you're free for Good Friday, we're going to have a great event at Betty T. Ferguson Park. We want to invite you to come out at 5 o'clock on the 7th of April. It's a free event. It's going to be a concert, all types of music. Be there. It's going to be a wonderful time. And with that, I want to say good night and thank you very much, and God bless.